Let's talk to Dr. Faras Abiad, who is the Lebanese Health Minister, joining us live now from Beirut. Dr. Abiad, Minister, grateful for your time this morning. Can you give us a sense of what has happened in Lebanon overnight?
So yesterday it was a night of heavy bombardment. A lot of areas in the south have, been under heavy attacks by rockets or by airplanes. We are still working very hard to recover all the bodies from the attack that occurred, on Friday. Up till now, the latest tally of people who were killed in that attack is 47, including 4 children and 7 women. And we are still also managing the casualties that are still in the hospital from the attacks that related to the communication devices that exploded over Tuesday and Wednesday.
Do you think that how likely do you think a full-blown conflict between Hezbollah and Israel now is, or perhaps even between the state of Lebanon itself and Israel, as we saw in 2006?
Well, I think that since the beginning of what happened in Gaza up till now, I think this is the closest we are to what appears to be a full-blown sort of conflict. It's very clear that what happened this week is seen as a major escalation or even a provocation, if you want. The statements that are coming out from Israel seems to be pointing in the direction of enlargement of the conflict and even talking about land invasion. And also, unfortunately, what we have also been listening from other parties, including parties in the region, makes us worry that if this indeed escalates, it will not only be a conflict between Lebanon and Israel, it might just escalate into a regional conflict as well.
Israel's President Isaac Herzog, interviewed on Britain's Sky News this morning, has said that the Israeli government does not want war with Lebanon, saying that the conflict has been instigated by Iranian proxies in the region, including Hezbollah, which of course dominates southern Lebanon. What would your response to that be?
Well, I think I find that hard to believe because, especially if you take, for example, this week, we had a lot of talk about a diplomatic solution. The Secretary of State from the U.S. was in the region holding such talks. And suddenly you had this well-timed incident, which is the exploding devices. And clearly, even the Americans came out and said that, they want parties not to, go or perform things that might be seen as escalatory. So I think that, the actions speak louder than words, and the actions on the ground do, definitely point towards an intent on escalation.
Does your state consider itself to be at war with Israel right now?
We are. I mean, there is no, and we have been for almost the beginning of the conflict. And the position of the Lebanese government, and I must say this is also of the Lebanese population, is that we do not want war. And we have called for a ceasefire from Gaza to Lebanon, and we believe that diplomatic solution is the best way to approach this. But unfortunately, as I said, it's very difficult to work on this when these events continue to happen. And when we see, especially when we see innocent civilians, women and children are suffering from these attacks, it actually, these, result in more, as I said, provocation, anger. It inflames the whole situation and makes it very difficult for any party to back up.
What would you say, Dr. Abiad, to critics of your government in Israel who would say, well, if Lebanon doesn't want war, then perhaps the Lebanese government ought to have controlled better Hezbollah militias, which are after all operating within your territory, who have made the lives of people in northern Israel almost impossible to bear and to live with because they're in fear of rocket attacks?
Well, what I would say is that if truly Israel doesn't want war, they can easily reach a diplomatic solution in Gaza that will have ramification on all of the region. And if indeed Hezbollah's pretext of launching these attacks is what's happening in Gaza, let's remove that pretext from Hezbollah and let's reach that ceasefire in Gaza, which everybody seems to agree can be the start of a diplomatic solution.
What would your message to Hezbollah be?
As I said, I think the Lebanese, the population, the whole population, message to everyone is we do not want war, and we are intent on not going that way. But at the same time, I must tell you this as a minister who was touring different hospitals, almost 90 hospitals in Lebanon that received the almost 3,000 casualties from the attacks with the communication devices, even in areas that are politically opposed to Hezbollah, even from parties that are on the other side of Hezbollah. When you see this large number of civilian casualties occur, there is a sense of national unity. And in my opinion, what happened was clearly a step in the wrong direction.
But would your message to Hezbollah be to be calm, to de-escalate, not to respond in a way that makes full regional conflict and war more likely?
I think that's a very sensible message. The only problem with that message is that at the moment, the one who is doing the escalation is not Hezbollah. If you look at the last 3 or 4 days, in succession, all of these attacks, there is a clear intent from Israel to escalate irrespective of what Hezbollah has done. And if you look at the response from Hezbollah, it hasn't been as strong as some people thought. But the question is, even if Hezbollah does not do anything...
No, but what they've said is that their attacks on Haifa, for example, which they've done overnight, is just part of an initial response. So that implies that they intend to respond more aggressively later.
If you look at the caliber of what happened over Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then you look at the response that occurred on the outskirts of Haifa, where no civilian injuries were reported, I think that the response from Hezbollah could be much worse, and this is something we fear because it will, as I said, push the whole region into a major escalation. I believe that the most important thing is if Israel stops these recurrent and succession of attacks, and my observation, not as a minister, but as a person living in Lebanon, is that, I think that the decision in Israel has already been taken, and they seem to be pushing the conflict into a direction of escalation. And I am worried, where will this take us? But it seems that the decision has already been taken.
The British government is gathering at the conference that I'm at the moment, the Labour Party. What do you want to see, or what, if anything, can the British government and European governments do to try and help de-escalate this conflict?
I think that there are 2 things, in my mind. The first one, which is extremely important, is that, within any conflict, the international community has reached international humanitarian laws that govern how conflicts should be undertaken. And, Lebanon, when it called for the Security Council to meet and lodged its complaint, we heard a very strong message from Mr. Turk, who's the High Commissioner of Human Rights, that what is happening in Lebanon, this indiscriminate attacks involving civilians, is a clear violation of international humanitarian law. And I think it is in the interest of everybody to make sure that conflicts do not go into that direction and involve a large number of civilians. The second thing that I think we would like to see from the UK government and other governments is to put more pressure on all parties to reach further de-escalation.
Okay, well, Minister, one way of, you talk about ending the pretext for war, one way in which perhaps it would be harder for Israel to continue to prosecute this war if all of the remaining hostages were returned. Would you call on Hamas to release those hostages?
Of course, I think that, what is important is, as I said, we need to de-escalate this. We need to allow the diplomatic solutions to take over. And I think the release of hostages was part of the diplomatic solutions that were being discussed. And of course, we believe that, these conflicts is not the right way to, or at least the use of force involving civilians is not the right way. Whoever is doing it is not the right way to solve this issue.
So they should release them immediately. Minister,
I think I answered your question. I think I answered your question clearly.
Well,
we call on all parties we all call on all parties, whether Hamas, whether Israel, whether to take action now to stop this targeting of civilians where it comes to Israel, to stop the carnage that they are doing in Gaza, and for Hamas to release the hostages immediately.